in the Middle East, if Iran was the only country that had nuclear weapons, they would most definitely need another nation to have nuclear weapons, just so that it can act as a threat to Iran. Israel, again, has never declared openly that they have nuclear weapons, but they have also not denied it. So, what most scholars would say, or people would agree with me, is that Israel is a nuclear capable country. If Iran had come out and said, okay, I have nuclear weapons now. Okay, so that is why the US needs to control any sort of nuclear enrichment that Iran could make.
Good morning and welcome. Today's conversation comes at a time of renewed turbulence in the Middle East, marked by direct US military intervention and intensified Iran Israel tensions, and shifting global alignments involving China and Russia. At the heart of these developments lies a complex web of strategic interest: energy security, regional stability, nuclear non proliferation, and the long standing effort to contain Iranian influence. With questions emerging around the effectiveness of US interventions and the evolving nature of power projections in the region, it's crucial to unpack both the intent and the consequences of recent actions. To help us make sense of these issues, I am honored to be joined by Dr. Aparajita Pandey, Professor of Defense and Strategy at the Amity Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies in Amity University. She also holds a PhD from JNU. Dr. Pandey's expertise in energy, statecraft, and strategic affairs offers a valuable lens through which to understand how states pursue, influence, manage conflict, and adapt to geopolitical changes. So, Dr. Pandey, thank you for being with us today. I'm really looking forward to your insights on this incredibly complex and evolving landscape.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, ma'am, my first question is to begin with. What are the core strategic interests driving US engagement in the Middle East, particularly in relation to regional stability, energy security, and the containment of Iranian influence? To what extent have US interventions in the region achieved their intended outcomes?
Okay, I think that's a nice place to start with, and it's quite a loaded question as well. So if we look at the Middle East, or as India would call it, West Asia, US has certain players that are definitely towards they play towards US's interest. One, of course, is Israel, and the other is Saudi Arabia. When we talk about regional stability in the Middle East, we have to see it from the Middle Eastern standards. You know, we are not talking about Europe, or we are not talking about North America. So we are never going to see that kind of stability. But as long as Iran and Saudi Arabia, even though they are the two opposing poles of Middle East, one is a Shia dominated country, and Saudi, of course, is Sunni, and they have developed to a certain extent. Both Iran and Saudi are quite great when it comes to their medical facilities, their educational facilities, all of that. So, by the standards of Middle East and the kind of politics they have, till the time Iran and Saudi are allowed to create a balance in the region tends to remain stable. You know, that is one thing that we have seen over the years. When it comes to US and American interests in the region, I believe that it's not so much about regional stability, but about the reach and influence of US all across the region. So Saudi becomes a great starting point there, because Saudi Arabia and US have had strategic and let's call them cordial relations for a long time. There is obviously an interest in the oil in region. Oil and gas is something that is great that is in large reserves in Saudi, and that's something that has always interested the US. Controlling that oil again is a big interest for the US. So till the time that the regional stability is such that there is no popular opposition or no political opposition to American interests, till that time the region can be stable, you know. And American interests don't just they start with oil and gas, and then they also meld into putting more governments in power that are more cordial, or that have a that have a view that is very much like the American democracy. So it is not completely opposed to the US culturally. So when we saw the Shah regime before the 1978 revolution in Iran, the Shah was obviously a friend to the US, if you can use the term friend very loosely. So they do want, I wouldn't say even democracies, but they do want regimes that are closer to the US, and they sort of propagate their own the American strategic interests in the region. At the same time, if we look at it now from I mean, nowadays that China has risen so much and has made such inroads into the Middle East, it would also want governments that are a little bit more opposed to China, that are more, that are not, they don't have a political tilt towards China. So whenever we're looking at American interests in the Middle East, we look at energy resources first, which is oil and gas, then governments that are going to support them and their strategic interests in the region. And China being a big factor now, that because China is making such great investments, huge investments in the region, they want countries that will have an American tilt versus a Chinese tilt. So that is one part of it. What was the second part of your question? Once again, if you could just repeat.
Ma'am, actually, you talked about 2 points here: Chinese
Yeah.
influence and the US's interest in regime. Let's park the Chinese influence for a while.
Influence right now.
And
Okay.
yeah, I mean, my next question rather is related to the regime change. So, in light
Okay.
of the recent U.S. military intervention amid the Iran-Israel escalation, how does Washington justify the use of force when its long-standing object of regime change in Tehran remains unrealized? So, what strategic value do you think that such actions offer if the Islamic Republic's leadership remains intact and continues to shape regional politics?
See, I think the whole regime change question, when it happened, even when Israel was the first one, the aggressor in this case, when Israel said that, quoting a right to defend themselves, they were the first ones to fire over Iran. There was a little miscalculation there. There is a thought process in Israel and the US that the people are not happy with the kind of regime that there is. Because according to them, according to the West mostly, or according to any country that is democratic largely, they feel that the people are not happy because it is an autocratic regime and it does oppress certain sections of society more than others. Now, there is truth to that. There are obviously protests within Iran as well against the regime. But what happened was, the miscalculation that happened was that they thought that the people would become against the regime, which did not happen. They thought that the people are so sick and tired of the regime that they would turn against their own government, so to say, which obviously did not happen. And when it came to a war-like situation, people banded together. So US has wanted a regime change in terms of the kind of government that there is. They want a more uh, quote unquote progressive Western looking government, whereas that is not happening. The Iranians have stuck to their core Islamic values, or a certain kind of government that is more tilted towards a theocratic structure, and that is not changing. I don't think that, even though US keeps on saying that this is about bringing democracy to the region or to the country, this has nothing to do with democracy anymore. Like you very well pointed out, that the regime change has not happened since the revolution. And I don't think that it is going to happen. There might be a change in the people who rule, but I don't think that there is going to be a complete overhauling or a 180 in the kind of rule that there is. So you can put one person, you can have a puppet that is more pro America, and then have him or her, him in this case, govern Iran. But nowhere in this governance is there going to be a purely democratic, more Western kind of regime. So at the moment, they are not trying to justify their intervention into Iran by saying that this is for a regime change. Rather, they are looking at the more nuclear angle. So that is what they are pinning their justification on.
So talking about the nuclear angle, what strategic rationale do you think that underpinned the US decision to launch direct strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities? And how do these actions align with its broader regional objectives? What does the absence of reported nuclear leakage suggest about the nature and intent of these strikes?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the last part of your question first, the absence of reported nuclear leakage. So that absence, that is a purely, a media-based thing. Iran is never going, or no country that is under attack is going to report their own failures or their own setbacks. At a moment where people are trying to draw strength from their own regime, the regime is not going to report any failure. Now, this is a thought process, this is a theory. There is also another theory which nobody can actually be sure about. There's no way that I can go and prove what I am about to say, but the theory that is circulating is that Iran knew such a thing was going to happen, and they took preemptive measures of actually, taking their nuclear stockpiles out of their known nuclear. It's another place which is not known to the world. This could have happened, this could not have happened. We don't know for sure. So, as far as the not reporting of it goes, I think it is a more of an info wartime, reporting your own losses. That happens in every war, in every region throughout history. Okay. Nuclear facility and regional stability, or US's strategic interest in the region. Except for the original members or original countries that had nuclear weapons, US has never wanted another country to have nuclear weapons. Let's be clear about that. They didn't want India to have nuclear weapons. They didn't want anyone else to have one. When India got nuclear weapons, it was in strategic interest of US to have Pakistan as a country that would also have nuclear weapons, because it would be a nuclear deterrence in South Asia. When it comes to Middle East, Israel, again, has never declared openly that they have nuclear weapons, but they have also not denied it. So, what most scholars would say, or people would agree with me, is that Israel is a nuclear capable country. Any other country in that region is not nuclear capable. Iran has always denied any nuclear capability, but we do know from the reports that have come in that Iran has had enriched uranium to a larger grade, more than the civil nuclear grade that is needed. So there is a thought process, or there was a threat that Iran might enrich uranium to military grade nuclear, whatever is needed. So what they have said is that if Iran were to get nuclear weapons, and because it is not a democratic country, it's an autocratic country, they are not fit to have weapons of mass destruction. That is the logic that US uses. And if Iran were to get nuclear weapon, it would certainly tilt the kind of politics that there is in the Middle East. Saudi is nowhere close to getting nuclear weapons. They do not have nuclear facilities, or if they do, they're definitely not military grade level. So when one country, which is already a huge, it is also geographically a very large country, Iran. So it does take up a chunk of the Middle East. It does have very complicated relations with the rest of the Sunni power. It is also a country that is very rich in oil and can block the Strait of Hormuz, which is very important for navigation or for mercantile traffic all around the world. So, a country that is so strategically important and is strategically powerful, for it to get nuclear weapons means that it will go up when it comes to any sort of threat in the region. So, that is one reason why US does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons at all, because then their fighting power, increases exponentially. And US also has to then make another country nuclear capable so that the deterrence factor can come in. Unless and until there is a threat to your hegemony, you are always going to be the ruler of that region. So in the Middle East, if Iran was the only country that had nuclear weapons, they would most definitely need another nation to have nuclear weapons, just so that it can act as a threat to Iran. unless and until you know that if I were to slap you and I knew that you would never slap me back, I could slap you endlessly.
Yeah.
But if I knew that you were equally powerful, I would not do that. So that would be deterrence. So to maintain regional stability, it would be important for two countries to have nuclear weapons. And one of those two cannot just be Israel.
Right.
Because there is obviously a huge history when it comes to Judaism and Islam. Then it would go into those kind of wars which were called crusades. So we are not trying to bring that back. Israel cannot only be the country that can assemble nuclear weapons, as they say. So to deter Iran, then there would be another country with nuclear weapons. That makes it even more difficult because almost all countries in this region are Islamic and not democratic. And if US is stopping one non-democratic theocratic country from getting nuclear weapons, they definitely cannot allow another one or help another theocratic non-democratic country to get it. If they were you if it is wrong for me, if it is wrong for Iran to have nuclear weapons because they are not a stable democracy, then it is also wrong for Saudi Arabia to have nuclear weapons because that is not a stable democracy. So US will not be able to help another country get those weapons in the region. So it will become a very complicated region for the US to control if Iran had come out and said, okay, I have nuclear weapons now. Okay, so that is why US needs to control any sort of nuclear enrichment that Iran could make.
Okay. So this is more about the establishing the balance of power in the entire Middle East. If you talk about it, so how do you see the USA's how does it evaluate the risk of nuclear proliferation in the entire Middle East, not just focusing on Iran or Israel, and following its own and Israel's military actions, and what diplomatic or strategic measures that can be taken in the future to mitigate this threat?
Okay, so let's divide Iran into if Iran was the globe, if Middle East was the globe, then Iran and Saudi would be the great powers, and countries like Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Jordan, Lebanon would be middle powers. So if we are looking at the Middle East like that, US does not see a problem of proliferation all around these countries. Most countries are not interested in nuclear weapons. That is not a part of their strategy. B, they cannot afford them. Afford them in the sense that they do not have the technological know-how for it. Iran has a very long tradition of great higher education.
Yeah.
They have physics and engineering and petroleum engineering and medical sciences that they have propagated for a long time. There is a propaganda or there is a thought process that because it is a theocratic country, Iran must not be great with education, which is completely wrong. They understand the value of technical know-how. Saudi, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, they are not countries that have focused on developing nuclear weapons at all. Neither are they countries that are interested in this kind of politics. They have oil money and they are leading comfortable lives. They do not want to get into unnecessary warlike situations. They are happy with where they are. So the problem here is not nuclear proliferation in the entire region. The problem again is one country getting too powerful and that country being anti-US originally also. Plus, Iran has great ties with Russia, which again is problematic for the US. When, we cannot see the Middle East in vacuum. So, Russia and China both have a presence, China more than any other country. So, for the US to leave Middle East be, to let them develop in any way possible, make the greatest strides in science and technology is not something that is great for the US. So they will always try to control how countries develop, what kind of technologies they move towards. So that is one thing, that is something that is always going to be there. That is one of their strategic interests.
Right. So we have been coming upon Chinese influence for a long time now. So given the deepening strategic alignment between Iran, China, and Russia, so how should the United States recalibrate its Middle East policy to maintain influence and deter adversarial encroachments? So in a scenario where US dominance is reasserted by the recent developments in the region, what do you think? How might China and Russia adapt to safeguarding their regional interests now?
Okay. So when we talk about China and its intervention in the Middle East, China has been intervening in all regions across the world. They have great inroads in Africa. They've made great inroads in Latin America, and the Middle East as well. We have to study Chinese intervention in a manner. You said that there are strategic interests that China and Russia have in the region. I'll get to Russia in a moment. China is not working militarily. It is putting in a lot of money for infrastructure building. China is only interested in earning money and controlling resources. So in Africa, they control a lot of cobalt and lithium, which they know is going to become more important as we move from oil and gas industry to an EV industry. In Middle East, they realize that these are countries that have great amounts of money because of oil and gas. So they built a lot of infrastructure in the region. They are buying a lot of oil. They're also building everything from critical infrastructure like roads, bridges, etc., to residential complexes. China is not trying to have any sort of military pact. China is only interested in money. At the same time, China is also not interested in your politics. Whether you're a democracy, whether you're a theocracy, whether you're a complete dictatorship, or you have no government at all. Till the time China can collaborate with you, put in money and get back money, they are good with it. So it is very difficult to stop a country like this, which has no bearing or no compunction about a country's politics or a country's strategic interest. At the same time, they also come in with a lot of money, a lot more money than US also can offer at this moment. So it's very difficult to stop a country like this. And it's also not there. China is not working to stop the Americans from coming in. They don't care about the Americans at this moment. They just, वो बस पैसे कमा रहे हैं. With Russia, of course, there is a strategic interest. Russia has always been a part of, they've been close to Iran. At one point, they were close to Syria during the Assad regime. Now, of course, there is no Assad regime. Russia is more interested in collaborating with countries that have energy. So if you just went back, say a year and a half, you would realize that Russia was trying to build an energy hub in one Iranian coastal town called Markan. And Russia already has great ties with Europe because of their natural gas production. So that would have helped Iran and Russia immensely. Iran, Russia, and China are together mostly because they are economically great for each other. It is, and that becomes a strategic interest. What US would do, or how it would affect the US, or how it would impact American strategy in the region is not their first priority. They are working for their own national interests. As far as US's strategic interests go, what US has done or what has happened to Iran now is certainly worked in interest of the US. Because for this, the progress that Russia, China, and Iran were making has stopped for a while now. It will take a long time to rebuild. At the same time, there any sort of threat that US had, that Iran, Russia, and China would probably start trading in a currency that is not US dollar, that has also stopped. Because that was something that was constantly coming up, that BRICS countries will make their own currency, which was sort of discarded because it doesn't make sense for BRICS countries to make their own currency, since there's not a lot of trade within the BRICS, The BRICS countries have trade with China, but they don't have trade with each other. So it doesn't make any sense for BRICS to have its own currency. But
Right.
they were thinking of either trading in the yuan or the ruble or a currency that is not US dollar, so that they would be sort of out of the clutches of the American dominance when it comes to an economic system. So that is also stopped now because of this attack on Iran. So US has maintained its strategic leverage in the region, and they will continue to do this because they have people in the region that support the US. They have Israel, they have Saudi Arabia, they have Kuwait. Even when there are countries that don't want to overtly go to war, there are certainly countries who will help the US, give them their airspace, give them military bases. So all of that will help the US to curb any such sort of complete disentanglement from American strategic interests in the region. They will maintain. Yeah.
Let's talk more about the financial interest in the region. So, what do you think are the economic implications of renewed US Iran hostilities, particularly in the context of China's continued import of Iranian oil and broader global energy markets? And I'm focusing on energy statecraft again.
Okay, so Strait of Hormuz is a choke point. That is one place where most of where almost a large percentage of mercantile traffic goes from, specifically oil and gas. China imports about, I believe it imports a large part of its oil from Iran, and that is going to be a problem. This conflict is going to impact crude oil prices around the world. They will go up, but thankfully the conflict has not gone on for so long that the Strait of Hormuz could be blocked. There was always, the Iranian parliament had voted for it. If the Strait of Hormuz was blocked, it would be a completely different conversation that we would be having. At this moment, I see some instability or some fluctuation in crude oil prices around the world, but then they will stabilize. What would happen, what I foresee, is that all sorts of alternatives to Strait of Hormuz now will be found. You know,
Right.
for a country like India, which is energy dependent, we might move to other countries. We import a lot from Iran as well, but we would look at other countries that are less politically volatile, areas where we can continuously get our oil, crude oil, and natural gas from, and areas which are reliable, that will not go into war constantly. So Guyana, Suriname, Brazil, Mexico, now they come up as great alternatives. We might see building of land infrastructure. Russia has already commissioned 2 pipelines out of Iran through Azerbaijan. They were thinking of building it under the Caspian Sea, but it wasn't very feasible there. So through Azerbaijan, and I think China will come in there also, where through the Silk Route they build something. So there would be a twofold sort of consequence. One is energy dependent countries will start to look at other areas where you can get oil from, less politically volatile, and we will need to find an alternative for the Strait of Hormuz so that the dependency on it can be lessened. So land-based alternatives might come in for any country that is in the Eurasian, Central Asian region, because Iran is well connected through there. It could also happen through Pakistan. Iran shares a border with Pakistan. For China, because China already has CPEC there and has considerable influence in Pakistan. So we could also see a pipeline through Pakistan, but again, that would come with its own problems, because we have the Baloch, we have the Pashtuns who might be sabotaging that pipeline, but there would be pipelines built. They take a little time and they take a lot of money, but again, they are not things that can be blockaded like the Strait of Hormuz. So no country would like to be completely dependent on the strait. China will continue to buy oil from Iran, but also sort of diversify its own sources, would buy probably lesser oil, or would just buy entire ports, depending on how much money China is willing to spend. So let's see. I think that is probably what is going to happen in the near future.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your time, insights, and expertise with us today. And I can say that conversations like this not only deepen our understanding of complex international issues, but they also highlight the importance of interdisciplinary research in shaping policy and strategy. So we truly appreciate your contributions and we look forward to following your continued work in this critical field. So thank you once again, and we hope to have you with us again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.